health and safety disclaimer. Working with food, especially meat, requires the strictest health and safety guidelines. If you're using any of my materials as a reference for curing meat, you're urged to follow the guidelines and recipes as provided, as well as the governmental health and safety guidelines for curing meat in your own country. Neither I nor my agents or representatives will accept liability for any harm or illness caused through failure by you to adhere to the disclaimer and all guidelines provided. If you're not certain about a process or technique, then contact me or another expert before moving on. That white stuff you see on cured meats, yes, that's mold. But why is it there? Mold is both friendly and foe, but there is absolutely no reason to be afraid of it if you understand and know what to look for. Most cured meats will have a white dusty surface, almost like it's been rolled in potato flour. That white dusty surface on a salami is a microbial landscape of mold, yeast and bacteria. The magnified view in this picture shows the fuzzy white mycelium of mold surrounding patches of yeast and bacteria. The white mold is Penicillium Species. You may also see different colored molds, but we'll talk about these a bit later. Penicillium species are molds that colonize the surfaces of cheese, salami and other naturally aged fermented foods. This fluffy white mold is our friend. It's very fast growing and acts as a natural barrier to protect the salami from competing molds or bacteria. The mold also keeps the cured meat from drying out too fast, thus slowing the drying process and enabling the development of all kinds of delicious flavors. The good thing is that if your curing environment is set up optimally, that is saying within the acceptable temperature range of 10 to 16 degrees centigrade, and your humidity is averaging out at 75%, never going higher than 80%, then you should never get unwanted molds because they tend to proliferate when the humidity goes above 80%. By checking my chamber every day, I am able to quickly detect if unwanted mold is taking hold. I then quickly remove it using a vinegar and water solution of 10% white wine vinegar and 90% water. I dip a clean cloth into the solution and wipe down the meats until the mold is removed. You may find that any molds, even penicillium, will not reappear after wiping with a solution, but it's better to have no mold than unwanted mold. The rule of thumb is if you don't like the look of it or the smell of it, then get rid of it with a vinegar solution. What I also do when I've just built a curing chamber or created a new curing environment is sterilize it thoroughly. Most of the time we will be converting second-hand fridges into curing chambers. Most fridges at some point would have had cheese. Cheese cultures are really bad for meat, but apart from that, we also just don't know what else might have been kept in there. Wash down all the surfaces of the curing chamber thoroughly with hot soapy water. Dry it off and then wipe all the surfaces off with bleach. You need to be careful here and wear gloves as the bleach is really harsh. Do not wipe the bleach dry afterwards, just open the door of the chamber and let it dry out by itself. It'll also have a really strong smell. By leaving the door open, you'll get rid of that smell too. After a day or so, run your chamber setup for a few days before you add any meat. Alright, let's take a look at adding good mold. When starting a new chamber, make use of Mould 600 if you can. Mould 600 is manufactured by C.H.R. Hansen and is readily available. It is a bacterial culture that introduces the Penicillium Species. It is applied to the meat before hanging, and its sole purpose is to ensure that beneficial surface mold wins the battle over the bad molds. I also usually make an additional batch and put it in a spray bottle. When my chamber has been cleaned and the smell of the bleach is dissipated, I run the chamber a few days without meat. Every day I spray some of the Mould 600 on the walls of the fridge. I spray just enough to get the walls slightly wet, not so that it runs down the walls, and then this helps to proliferate the environment with the good mold. Then obviously when I make my first batch of meat, I dose the meat with Mould 600 as per the instruction on the package. My personal preference is I don't continue using Mould 600 after a while because the natural mold should have proliferated now. But there's absolutely no harm in always using it or applying it to the meat, because then at least you ensure that the good mold holds. If your curing chamber is set up as described earlier, you really should not have a problem with any coloured moulds or unwanted moulds. But this is not always possible. I've seen some really strange coloured moulds in my time, ranging from orange right through to purple. Again, the rule of thumb is if you're not comfortable with it, wipe it off. Use the vinegar solution to do so. If you find that you're continually getting coloured moulds, then check your chamber setup. Make sure that you're running it at the right temperature band and that your humidity does not go over 80%. If your chamber is set up properly and you're still getting coloured moulds, then I would apply the cleaning regimen that I've explained earlier. Wash down the chamber, wipe it with bleach, and then reintroduce the good mould through spraying the Moulds 600. Sometimes the white Penicillium mould is accompanied with the dusty grey mould. I'm not really concerned with this as long as it sits on the actual white mould. But if you get a grey mould that starts to take hold of the meat, then I would ensure to wipe it off with a vinegar solution. Interestingly, green mould is often prevalent in cured meats, even if your desired humidity levels are present. Many people are worried about this greenish mould, but scientists have found a type of mould that is prevalent in cured meats, which they've aptly named Penicillium salami. This mould is green. But once again, if you're worried about it, then play it safe and wipe it down with the vinegar solution. So how do I detect bad mould? Well, a lot of this comes down to experience, but mostly it's just about common sense. I mean, the white fluffy mould actually does look quite pleasant, and when you smell it, it has that damp smell that you usually associate with a cellar or a cave. But if it looks foul and smells foul, it probably is foul. I would never take a chance. It's better to toss something that looks bad rather than getting really ill. Lo and behold, you make somebody else ill. I do not really like furry or multicolored mould. If you're checking your chamber regularly, you will detect unwanted mould and you'll be able to wipe it off. But if it has had time to take hold, you may find that it is dug into the meat, almost creating roots. This is when I toss it. I also do not like it when the inside of the meats become mouldy. You don't usually find this in whole muscle meat. However, it can appear in rolled pancetta or something like culatello. If the cut has not been tied properly, there will be air pockets, and this is the perfect place for bacteria to grow. Generally, when I find mould in these cavities, I toss the meat because it could mean that it's been there for a long time and has already caused damage. I know it's soul destroying, but it's not worth taking the risk of illness. It also often appears in dry cured sausages where the false meat has not been mixed properly or the bind has not been created. When you slice into the sausage, it has a sort of crumbly texture and you may find mould inside. Again, use your discretion, but I would invariably toss it. Black mould is a big no. If any black mould appears on my meats, I do not take the chance, I toss it right away. Fortunately, I've only had black mould once, but I know it can be very frustrating if you get a piece of meat that you've been curing for some time and black mould appears on it. And this black mould is usually a very dangerous type of mould, and I just won't take a chance. But just make sure that the black you see is not from the ground spices sitting near the surface. If you do have a black mould problem, I would suggest clearing out the meat and disinfecting your curing chamber and reintroducing Moulds 600 as I explained earlier. If you followed the steps that I've given you in this video, you should never have problems. But just remember, if it looks foul and smells foul, then it probably is foul. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions or you're just not certain about the mould that you have in your chamber or on your cured meats. Please remember to click on the subscribe button to keep updated of any new postings. My name is Gilbert Ferreira. I'm originally from South Africa, but I've been living in Poland now for the last 2 years. My curing journey started over 15 years ago, and in that time I've been curing as a hobbyist, but also commercially for about 6 years of that time. I focus mainly on European style meats, and my absolute favorite is culatello. I personally still feel that I have a lot to learn, but I have had some experience, and one of the things I really enjoy doing is sharing that with people and also trying to help people who are getting into this art form. So hopefully I'll be able to help you on your journey. When I started my curing journey over 15 years ago, there was limited information available on the internet. So most of what I learned was off the pages of books. I struggled with a lot of the techniques from reading because much of this art form is about feel. I mean, it was really difficult for me to visualize cutting out the H-bone off the pages of a book. As a result of this, I grew a passion for teaching people what I'd learnt through a course that I'd developed. One of the things that I've always wanted to do was write a book, and during the COVID lockdowns in 2020, I eventually had the time to commit to writing. So I started the journey of creating Preserved Pigs, The Art of the CureSmith, salting and smoking techniques and recipes for beginners and experts. My problem was, however, how to impart my knowledge I had gained on a two-dimensional canvas that is a book, and I found it impossible to put everything in writing. As a result, this became more of a project. Preserved Pigs has now been 1 year in the making and has been developed in 12 parts. It has been created as a mixed media publication which includes the book, as well as a website with additional information that I could not fit into the book, and instructional videos like how to remove an H-bone, as well as an online course. Part 1, the introduction, is ready for release in May 2021, and the additional 11 parts will follow shortly thereafter. Please visit preservedpigs.com for more information on this project.